Alright guys, welcome back to the Corsair build. If this is your first time finding my videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below. Also, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. And if this is your first time subscribing to my channel, make sure you hit that bell so you get notified when I release new videos. I have a roadblock, not a big roadblock, just a little one with the rear actuator. So because we don't have any of the stock control rods, we have to make all the control rods for this. So, which is fine. As I did on the elevator ones, I needed to solder on those threaded couplers. And I will need to do the exact same thing with this rear strut actuator. So one side is threaded, which is fine. That threads into the little coupler thing right there, right, on the rear gear. This side has no threads, so we need to get one more of those threaded pieces tomorrow from the hobby store. I don't have any, and that puts us in a bit of a conundrum. So not a huge conundrum, but just a little one. So anyways, still progressing. All right, so the threaded rod has been threaded and inserted. So this is the factory end that's going into the strut. The manual says put a nut on it, so that's done. Also did up the pull cables for the tail wheel. So I did these exactly as the manual states. One end's done right now. Their shrink wrap's too big, so the shrink wrap that's shown in the manual there doesn't shrink enough, so I just use my own shrink wrap. So threading these through the tail section right now, and then basically what do we do next? We insert the tail wheel assembly, get those hooked up, and then we'll put the Robart electric actuator. We'll install that as well too. So that's all going to be done here pretty quick. Once the Robart actuator is installed, then we will hook up the Rudder Servo, which is shown right there. So that's the next steps that are happening. And once this is done, this is going to lead us to a bunch of things that are going to need to happen. So basically we've got the tail wheel doors that are going to need to be installed. So that's going to be quite a process to get all that done. So we're progressing quickly through this stuff, but then we'll be a little bit slower with the door assembly. All right, guys, so threading the rod actually didn't work out because there's not enough surface to bite into. You might be able to see it there, but the threads in this case are flush with the outside of the rod. And if you look at the stock rod, the threads actually protrude further than the rod itself. So anyways, that didn't work. So we have some threaded couplers that I picked up. This is what I used on the other surfaces, and I'll have to insert one of these on the tail wheel as well. We're going to put one of those on the rudder anyways. So yeah, so that's what's happening. All right, guys, the Robart actuator is all set up. I've tried it already. It works good. Yeah, there's really nothing to talk about. I guess one little note here is on the mount, because the wire comes out of the actuator right on top of a screw head, you can only fit one screw in. Now I don't foresee that being a problem at all. Like there's the back side, it's got another layer of ply behind there, so it should be just fine. I'm going to put some CA on that screw head, just so that part's done. But everything else worked out really well. No problems with that. The tail works out good. The only thing with the tail is it is very slow with that Robart actuator. So I've got a 7 volt or 2-cell LiPo powering it, and takes probably about 15 seconds for full extension. So it's I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's I guess very scale. I'm not sure, I can't remember how slow the main gear are. I think they're a little bit faster than that, but not by much by any means. So anyways, it should look nice in scale. So that part's done as far as I can get it. I think the next step that I'm going to complete here is the Rudder Servo and get that all set up while we're in the tail section. And basically what we've done now is we've installed the strut, Loctited all the screws, and installed the cables. So used all the hardware that has been suggested in the manual, put it on the appropriate hole, the middle hole in the control arm, you can see there, and so that's all done. The servo's installed, and so the rudder servo is actually installed. I still have to check the alignment for the rudder and plug this in, but that's an 8411 servo, and so that's there. And then we've got the control surfaces for the cables on the rudder. So we need to get those set up, but first we do need to plug the servo in and check the alignment. All right, guys, so ran into a little problem here. I was just setting up the pull cables for the tail wheel, and thought I got it all set up and everything. And then what happened was I pushed on the tail wheel, and the rod that goes from the Robart actuator, the linear actuator, to the tail wheel actuator bent. So you're not going to be able to see it in there, but the rod's in there, and the rod just went bloop and bent down with not a ton of force. So I did need to look at that. I might need to reinforce that rod in the part that's not in the sheathing. So basically that rod moves through this plastic sheathing, but the sheathing ends kind of around this area on the fuselage, and then the rest of it is just exposed rod. So I need to take this all apart now and figure out a solution for that. What I'm probably going to end up doing is some of this carbon rod, which I buy and use for control rods and stuff. Basically you just epoxy this or use Loctite and put that over top of the control rod, and it stiffens everything up. So we'll have to take that apart and see what we're up against. Well, guys, in an unplanned sequence in the build, we have an issue with the hardware that comes with this kit. So I was just undoing the rear bolts holding the tail wheel in, and they snapped. These two snapped. They're only held in with blue Loctite. I'm really hoping that the other ones don't snap, but yeah, this is awesome. So we'll see what happens with the other four. There's two here and then two more down at the bottom. Okay, guys, you might be able to see it in there. There we go. Yeah, the rod's bent. So we're going to undo it from this side. And I think what I might try to do beforehand is mark it with a Sharpie so I know how much needs to be reinforced. It's kind of just that last, well, no, it's not, it's the whole thing, but I have to leave enough room obviously to allow the rod to compress or pull back to drop the wheels. So okay, guys, so you can see the bend there. I just untwisted it from the Robart side, and I did manage to mark the line that existed against the tube. So the current tube sits about here, but we need to allow enough movement for the actuator to actually retract. So that actuator retracts roughly about that much, so about 25 millimeters, which would make sense. An inch is probably what the movement is. So that means we can't come anywhere past that bend. All right, guys, so I've got two different sizes of carbon tube. I've got this bigger one and this smaller one. Now the smaller one is, this is the information on it right there. So I picked this up at the local hobby store. It's fairly expensive. It's about 10 bucks. I think it's $20 for the piece, but it's what we need. Now the problem we run into is that the threads don't fit into the tube, but the actual metal piece does. So we've already got this rod made up, which has the end that attaches to the strut, and then we've got this end which is soldered on. But I think what I'm going to need to do is build a new end, insert the carbon piece, and then solder this piece on. So I've got another control rod I'm going to build this out of, but that's, I think, the best plan going forward. And we'll just have to make the rod the exact same size, and then put carbon to where we can, minus the distance of the travel of the Robart strut. So hopefully that all makes sense, but I've got to reinforce this section, and that's what we got to do. We've got the original mark against the tube, 25 millimeters back, or 1 inch back. Let's just check that. I think it was 25. Yep. 1 inch back plus a little bit, so I've got a little bit of area there. So what I did was I told you that this doesn't go over top of the threads, but because this end, it's split a little bit, I was able to feed the carbon over top of this side, and then I put CA all over this and quickly spun it onto the threads, and it worked good. And then I just went back, and it's kind of ugly, but it's all going to be hidden. So anyways, that's all sealed up and nice and firm. So now we're only going to have one little weak spot on this entire rod, and that's going to be this 25 millimeters. Hopefully this works. The other end's been soldered on, so that's all fine, and I got to put a nut on this side, but I have to feed this through the tube before I put the nut on. So we'll see what happens. I've tested this, it all works good. Is definitely a step that I really didn't want to do, but it's done now. So steering's all done as well too. Just got to put the little keepers over top. Everything's set up good. So tail wheel's done, rudder's done, tail wheel steering is done, and good progress. So what I did is I took the mount that was supposed to be used for the air actuating servo, and this was actually mounted right in there. And I'm going to use this for the throttle servo. So what I did was measured the distance between the base tray there and the upper portion here, trimmed that amount off, you can see there, and now this fits just perfect in there. There's no wiggle room, so we can either glue or screw that in. So we're going to have the throttle servo sitting there, and I think what's going to happen is the servo is going to be sitting there, the arm's going to be positioned towards the outside of the fuselage, and then the actual piece used for the throttle cable is here, and this is going to have to be trimmed substantially, but that's what we're going to do, and that all lines up perfectly with the hole that was done by the previous builder. So the hole's there for the throttle cable, and it runs right against this wall. So I think that setup will work just beautifully. And the other thing too is when this is in place, the tank can slide in nicely, doesn't interfere with anything, and I think that's going to work out perfect. Guys, so with the rudder being done, one of the next things we have to do is get the throttle servo set up, and when I do that, I'll also need to put the tank in as well too. So I figured I would take the tank apart and see what kind of condition it's in. I took the main lines off there, off here. Now this was all done great. There's nice barbs installed on there, but the lock wire is not stainless steel, so you can see that it's rusted, and it's also a thick gauge. So one of the things I don't like about this setup is the clunk line doesn't actually go all the way to the bottom of the tank. So you can see it here. When it's like that, the clunk line will only go about halfway, roughly. So I'm going to change that out. Everything else about that's fine, but I'm going to put, I think, some BVM clunk line on there, which is just more flexible. And that will be the tank, basically. These have been redone, or the tube's been redone, and there's a lot more flex in this BVM line. So it comes like this. It's just not really sure what it is. It's almost like Festo tubing, but it's really thin-walled and nice and flexible and very large. So anyways, that's what I've used on there. Works good. I'm going to put the tank back together. Alright guys, tank is all back together. Marked the fuel and vent lines. Do that with all my tanks so you're not confused. Also have mounted the throttle servo. So I just used CA to mount it. Was able to get CA on all the joints and everything, so that is super solid. And yeah, very, very happy with that. I did put the engine back on, just held it there, and this hole is not the right size. So I need to enlarge that hole a little bit because the throttle can't go to full throttle. It actually bumps one of the walls there. So we need to sand that out a little bit. But you can see the line up there to the throttle servo. So that should work just beautifully. Alright guys, throttle servo is all set up. I actually ditched the old flexi rod thing, this thing, and just went with a solid cable. So because it was such a straight shot to the engine, I figured this would be perfect. So I did the sanding in there, opened up the opening up a little bit, opened up the opening a little bit. That didn't make any sense. Anyways, there's the throttle servo. I actually ditched the little brass piece that were supposed to be used here. It actually stripped, so not overly impressed with the hardware in this kit so far. I've had to replace a bunch of it. Some of the things like the clevises and things, they seem like they're decent quality, but there's a bunch of things that are just a little subpar. So anyways, use one of the Dubro heavy duty easy connectors right there, and that's what I connected the throttle servo with. So that's it. It's all set up, ready to go. Can adjust the limits just a little bit, but it's pretty darn close. So put the zip ties through the frame for the tank. Engine, I think, is going to get reinstalled now that throttle servo is set up. So I just have two of the bolts temporarily holding this, so I'll put the other ones in, put some Loctite on them, and the engine will be installed now at this point. And then we can put the tank in and kind of work on those things. Yeah, so things are progressing nicely. All right, guys, so I kind of had a cool idea here. I thought, man, these pipes look exactly like they could fit through the scale exhaust. And they actually do fit through the scale exhaust. And I thought, well, these are going to get fairly hot, right? So what are they made of? So I bit on one with my teeth, and I felt like they were fiberglass. But what I did was I just held it like this over a lighter, heated it up, and these are plastic, so they're just plastic tubes. So that idea is kind of out of the question. But dang, that would have been really cool just to have that one pipe going through there. So anyways, still going to work out good. The cowl comes to here. I think that looks really, really good. Sorry, the cowl comes to here, and I think that's going to look really, really good. Better than the other engine options where you've got the pipe sticking out of the bottom of the cowl. So what I'm going to do is I'm using this the scale exhaust pieces. There's one for this side, one for this side, and I'm going to cut out templates of this wood piece because we also have to put some other things in here. We need to put the fill line, the vent line, and so what I did is take the extra mounting plates for different engines, cut those out of wood, and so we'll have some filler pieces to put in this area. And then also what we can do with these plates is we can cut out or notch out the plate so it actually holds the exhaust in place. Now these exhausts are not going to go anywhere. They're nice and solid. They're actually sprung against the firewall, but if we can get that notched out and just have it firmly planted down with two screws holding this piece in place, or the template anyways in place, that will work out perfect. So we're going to do one on each side, and happy that solution is going to work. Now I'm just trying to figure out some other things too. So we're going to have, and this is kind of covered in the manual, we're going to have one of the fill lines for the fuel mounted in here. So when you want to fill the fuel up, you just pull the line out, fill it up from there. We've got one of the vent fittings, which is going to be probably in this other side here, and then we also have the vent for the engine. And apparently these engines they run really rich, so it's 20 to 1 on the fuel to oil ratio, or or higher is what they suggest in the manual. So 20-to-1 is the minimum. So it's a fair bit of oil, but apparently this and other parts of the engine will just puke oil out. So what I've also read in the manual too is running this line to the end of the exhaust. Now it talks about some different things that the exhaust was, or the engine was supposed to come with. We didn't get any of that stuff, so I'm probably going to run a line of smoke tubing, which is heat resistant, and I'm going to run that to one of these exhausts as well too, and that'll be a nice place for the all the oil and crud coming out of there to vent to. So just some ideas. Playing around with the ignition system. I think I'm going to mount the ignition system on the side of the engine bay, and I think that's going to work out good. I was going to mount it up here initially, but now we're too close to the exhaust and there's too much stuff going on up there, so it's going to work well on the side, I believe. And I don't think we're going to put anything on this side, and I just want to leave the top, the plane's upside down, right? I just want to leave the top open for adding weight. So the plane, the kit comes with a bunch of wood boxes that you can fasten to this area and add weight to it, because apparently we're going to need to add a ton of nose weight. So I don't want to put it all on the cowl. If you can put it on the firewall, that's better. But anyways, that's kind of my thinking behind all of this stuff. And the other thing I was thinking of was the on-off switches. So pretty sure we're setting this plane up with 4 batteries. So we're going to have 2 for the receiver. We're going to have 1 for the gear and 1 for the ignition. Now in the manual, this Saito controller says 6 to 9 volts, but this controller, which it's old, but it should be the same controller, it says 6 to 8 volts DC. So I was going to use 1 battery for the landing gear and the ignition and just use a nice small 2200 milliamp LiPo. But the problem with that is if it doesn't work with the ignition. So I might do a bit of research on that. If it doesn't work with the ignition, we're probably going to end up using one of these batteries for the ignition, because we've got 2 for the receiver, 1 for the ignition, and then just get a nice little LiPo that we can run the landing gear off of, because the landing gear requires, you can read it here, this down and lock controller, minimum 7.4 volts, maximum 12.6. So basically 2-cell LiPo or a 3-cell life, something like that. So anyways, the LiPo I think might be the best option. So what I was getting at was, I think what's going to happen is we're going to put probably 2 batteries in here. The LiPo is probably going to go, well, it's going to go in there for sure, because we'll need to pull it out for charging. And then if we do use 4 batteries, one of the other batteries, one of the nickel metal hydride batteries, is going to be mounted inside. But what I was thinking about doing was putting the on-off switches down here. Initially I was thinking about putting them in the cockpit, which is fine. I might still do that, but if I can mount them to the underside of this cover, I think that's going to work beautifully, because we don't really need to get into this area. We would need to get into this area anyways to use to charge the LiPo. So this is probably going to be coming off on a regular basis anyways. So yeah, I just need to put some thought in on that. But made some good progress today. Not as much as I'd like, but some neat ideas. Had to do a lot of thinking in this area in order to get things set up properly. All right, guys, so fuel system, I think I've pretty much got it figured out here. So we've got this is the line that feeds the engine. So the actual connection's right back there. Anyways, I had to get a filter because there's not one included in the kit. I think in the manual it even says it's optional, but it's required. So anyways, put the filter in, the T-fitting, that's all been safety wired. So this is going to be our fill line here. And this line is going to the pickup on the tank. So basically the fill line is going to route back down, come out the servo connection here, and then the fill line is going to be on this side. So we've got a bulkhead fitting that's going to go through that whatchamacallit, the plate that we're going to put here, right? That's going to sit there, and then that's where the fuel dot's going to be. So that's where our fuel goes into the system. So that'll come to the T and then go into the tank. And then our vent line, which is this this line here, the V line, that's also connected to the vent on the tank. That's going to come out and come up through here, and our vent is going to be on this side, going through the vent fitting, which is going to be mounted like this. So that's kind of my initial plan here, and I think I've got everything pretty much figured out and ready to go. All right, guys, tank is in, engine is in, bolts are done up, we got our lines run. I tried using the zip ties that came with the kit, and they are just really old and brittle. So as soon as I went to go tighten these up, they just would snap, which is fine. The actual slots were nice and wide. They were basically wide enough to fit this Velcro in. So the kit came with this really thin Velcro, which is nice, but they weren't quite long enough. I'm not sure what the purpose is, but anyways, I put the two pieces together, and they are used in the front, and then I have some other Velcro that I used in the back. So tank is Velcroed in place. It's nice and solid. The other thing I like about that too is now we can install that extra battery that I was talking about in the front area here, over top of the tank. So it gives us a couple more options for mounting things, and I like that better. So anyways, tank's done, and we have our vent line here, which is gonna, like I said, come over here, and then our fill line, which is gonna come to this side. And yeah, good progress. So it's the end of the day today. That's the last thing I'm going to do today. We'll continue on this tomorrow, but we made some good progress. All right, guys, that's the end of this video. Thanks so much for tuning in, and don't forget to check out the next video. If this is your first time here, guys, and you found my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below, and also give this video a thumbs up. Also, when you hit that subscribe button, don't forget to hit the bell so you get notified when I release new videos, and get to see more of Luna. So thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.